and posting it. So there it goes. And is there any objection to the recording? And if you can use the raise your hand function, there will be towards the end of the meeting public comment and time for people to weigh in after you hear what's going on for the public. And trying to think anything else. If you could keep your mute button on unless you're going to be speaking, it helps everybody. And similarly with your camera. So with that, we'll get going. I do not see Sam, who is my go-to person for tribal acknowledgement. So I will acknowledge that we are on the ancestral lands of the Coast Salish people who have been hunting, gathering, and taking care of these lands for time and eternity. And we should be aware, and we have many tribes that have ancestral roots to the National Monument and San Juan County. So Kurt, with that, opening remarks.
Got to unmute myself now, Jamie. Yeah, we got a lot of things on the agenda today. Looking forward to having a great day. It's a lot of stuff going on in the world right now. I know that. I can acknowledge that, of course. It's great to meet the group again. A lot of updates, I think, to pour into the group. And I'm looking forward to some good discussion today as we move through it. That's it.
Great. Thank you. And I'm going to go through and introduce the people who are here on the call, since it's a small group today. So I'm going to start with and go with the way my pictures are on my screen. So Tracy, could you start off the introductions? You're muted, first of all. That would be unmute.
Thank you. Thanks, Jamie. Tracy Cottingham, 24 years on Lopez Island. I am the position of cultural heritage, and I think that's how it's said. And I've also lead up the KOPL Keepers of the Peytos Light docent program, where we open up the lighthouse at Peytos from Memorial Day till mid-September, and always looking for new docents. Thank you.
Thanks. Amy.
Thanks, Jamie. I'm Amy Nestler. I'm the Communications and Stewardship Manager for the San Juan Islands Visitors Bureau, and I represent Recreation and Tourism here from San Juan.
Thank you. And we heard from Kurt, our District Manager, so I'll go to Tom.
Hi, Tom Reeve, Lopez Island on the MAC, representing Culture and Heritage.
Great. Rick.
Rick Wiggery, on the MAC, I represent public at large.
Thank you. Dell.
Oh, morning, Dell Gunther. I represent ecology on the MAC.
Could we, I want to point this out while everyone's here, since usually the first meeting, everyone's paying attention. This will be Dell's last meeting, and he's served on the MAC for several years. And let's give him a little hand and thank him.
Glad to be here.
Thank you. Ruth. If you make sure you unmute yourself. You need to unmute yourself, Ruth.
Sorry about that. I hit the button too often. Ruth Milner, representing Wildlife and Ecology. I was the district wildlife biologist for the San Juan Archipelago for 28 years and retired from that in 2021. Thank you.
Thank you. And Erin.
Hey there, everybody. Erin Cora. 21 years on San Juan this month, and I serve as the education and interpretation aspect of the MAC, and I am the founder and executive director of Folks, Friends of Limekiln Society. So ramping up big time for everybody for this season, and great to see y'all.
Good to have you. Brie, could you introduce the BLM people?
Absolutely. Kurt, do you want to start?
Absolutely. Hey, everyone. Great to see everyone. I'm Kurt Pindel, the district manager for Spokane and Coeur d'Alene districts.
And Rich?
Good morning. This is Rich Bailey, Cultural Heritage Program Lead for Spokane District.
Thank you. And good morning, everybody. Oh, Michelle, you're here. Michelle, introduce yourself.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Michelle Brown. I'm the Deputy District Manager for the Spokane District. Nice to see you.
And Larissa, do you want to say hi?
I think she had to jump off.
Okay. Yeah. I'm Brie Chartier. I'm the San Juan Island National Monument Manager.
Okay, thank you. And looks like we have Sally in general public. It looks like we have James McCubbin from Friends of the San Juans and Sally Reeve, citizen, and Connie Holtz. I don't think I see anybody else at the moment. So with that, we're going to go through some things today. We got a lot to go through, and as Kurt said, there's a lot of updates. So I'm just going to kind of go through here. We don't have minutes to approve, but anyway, on the agenda, Kurt's going to update us on some of the mechanics of what's going on. Getting the fall meeting in the Federal Register, take a little break, and then we'll have a status report from Brie, and then we're going to have a working group discussion and see where we want to go for our next meeting and talk about some possible visits to monument sites. And then we'll have an open forum for as long as it lasts, depending on who's on the call. So is there any changes or additions anyone wants to make? I will note, and thanks to Tracy, she put out last night, Cindy Smith is attending a very important graduation of her daughter. And so she did post some, Tracy forwarded some of her comments, mainly about Richardson Rocks and signage that she thought was very helpful. And we can bring that up during our discussions today, because that's one of the things we want to talk about, was getting signage out right away. So with that, I'll move right on to the status reports with Kurt.
Yep. Thanks, Jamie. Appreciate that. So first update is on MAC nominations. So as we all know, we have 3 expiring nominations. I think it was May 23rd. So that's coming up fairly quickly. We just outlined and talked to Dell. Dell, it's always been a pleasure working with you. The other 2, so from what I remember, there is 2 folks that are trying to re-up, and Dell is rolling out. We did get nominations. There are 4 submitted nominations at department right now. So in talking to Carrie Richardson, who runs part of that program at headquarters, she thinks that we should have no problem in trying to get the other members, or at least one more member, back in and completed, or all 3, I'm sorry, all 3 completed by the next meeting, which is September 27th is our expected date. So with that, I know it's there. I know they're going to, it's already been in process. They have them. I think they're just finalizing and collecting them. And the bottom line there is we should have nominations completed by September. That's the early indication from headquarters. So with that being said, even if it didn't get done, we would still have enough folks to have a quorum, and we would not have to worry about that, not having a MAC meeting or a full quorum in a MAC meeting. So just as a side, that's just a backup plan, but I don't think we'll have to go there. I think we'll be fine on that. Any questions on that before I move on to the next topic? Okay.
It's so unusual to have everything going on time.
I'm a little surprised too, Jamie. Yeah. Secretly, I'm rapping on my desk on wood. So go ahead, Tracy. I think you had a question.
Yes, I certainly you're in the know, but I had heard Genevieve may not have reapplied, and that's important for us to know as we send out invites for September 27th. If you wanted to confirm with that offline or whenever it's
Yeah,
convenient.
I'll have to confirm that offline. I'll have to figure that out. And I'm sorry, Tracy, I had that info and I just can't find it again. So someone sent it to me at the end of the last, I think before Jeff left. He sent me that information and I just can't find it right now. But you're right. There were 3, and I know Dell was leaving. I can't remember if there was a second, but I know we had 4 strong candidates that were behind that. So even if we did, and you know, I'm pretty sure we'd have more than just enough to and it was 2 at large and ecology for Dell.
All right, thanks. Thanks, Kurt.
Sure. Other questions? Okay. All right, the districts, a quick update on that. So in essence, what I've spoke about before is the split that will occur once we get the other district manager for Spokane. In essence, that position has been advertised. It will close on May 14th, I believe. That's the closing date. If I was going to give, I'll give you 2 different scenarios here, folks. So if scenario 1 is if someone's hired from not local, not in this area, essentially we're going to have to, the end of September or middle of May, it'll close. By the 1st of June, we'll have it go through what they call the first panel. It's called a subject matter expert panel. By that time, the state office has a panel that will start doing, conducting interviews and doing background checks, that sort of thing. I would expect at least another couple weeks for that. That'll put us in the middle of June timeframe. Then at that point, once a selection is made, or at least candidates are 1, 2, and 3, they'll be sent to headquarters. Headquarters has to approve the final selection. That'll put us into July. If that person accepts that job sometime the first week of July-ish, let's just say it's typically 2 months before that person would arrive if they're moving with family and have to sell a house and all that sort of stuff. So that would put us into the first week of September-ish. That would be my time frame for someone from out of area. Now, if it's a local candidate, that would happen a little bit faster. There wouldn't be any transfer of station. We wouldn't have to wait that extra 2 months. I would expect that to happen in July. And just so it's clear, once that district manager gets here, that's when the official split would occur. So the district manager would be over the Spokane, and that would include the border field office when actually in the San Juan Islands. Okay, questions?
Do you have any, I guess, since the applications haven't closed, you don't have any feeling for how many people or?
No,
Any
they
of
won't
that?
they won't give me that even when it does. So I won't have an update on that. They usually keep that a little bit tight to the chest, if you know what I mean. They don't want to release that info just yet. So won't know that. But if I hear something and it becomes public, I'll certainly let everybody know. Okay.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. All right. Fall meetings. So I did check with headquarters about the fall meetings. Our Federal Register notice is ready to go. Jeff got that done before, and I think the 2 dates are September 27th. And I believe the other one was December 6th.
It may be the 7th.
It's the 7th. I was thinking the tribal forum is the 6th.
Okay.
Yep. So it's the 7th. Yep. So in essence, they are ready to go with it. We should have no problem in getting that out and getting that approved easily by our September meeting. When I talked to them, they said that they have a target date of the middle or end of June to try to get that out. That gives us more than our 30 days to get it approved through the FRN process and getting both meetings approved. So no issues there as far as I see. One weird issue that happened is somebody issued 2 notices on top of one another. So they had the same number. It's a tracking number. So they had to split it and they had to put ours under a separate tracking number, which kind of confused everybody. But we did find it. It is there. I confirmed when I had that talk with Carrie Richardson. So I know she's aware, and yeah, she has it on her radar. So I love giving good news, right? I mean, it's wonderful when everything works in government. It's just a wonderful thing. It's often slow, but it's just nice to see the process rolling forward. Any questions on that?
So,
All right,
I'm sorry, what's Carrie's position?
Carrie Richardson works for, what's her name? Nada Culver.
Oh, okay.
And in essence, she is delegating part of her duties are making sure that MAC nominations get through, anything to racks. So she basically controls that piece of things and Federal Register notices, that sort of thing. So that she's our go-to person for some of those things in the at headquarters.
Thank you.
Yep, sure. And then finally, okay, so for public affairs, we've kind of split some of the duties on the public affairs front. So we have a weekly reporting criteria that we have to put in. So if something happens like during the week, and Brie needs to report on that, Michelle Brown, the deputy district manager who's on the meeting, will be reporting that, and that has to be in the week before if we're trying to get it in for the following week. So there's a reporting criteria, I believe it's Wednesday or Thursday, that we have to get that information in to our state office, and they'll report out for the following week. If it's day-to-day stuff, like if we have a fire, if we have something we're trying to get announced, that sort of thing, then Suzanne Ensley is the PAO in Coeur d'Alene, and she's helping out with some of the specific PAO duties. So if it needs something to be written up, or if we're doing something with like a Federal Register notice, that sort of thing, she helps us with those sorts of things. So she'll take on part of those duties, and Michelle will take on part of those duties also. So I know that's not super clear. People have, okay, what about this instant or that instance? Just get in touch with us and we'll figure it out. I mean, it just depends on what we're trying to announce and what we're trying to get into the, depends on what outlet we're trying to get into. So in essence, we just divided the duties out. That's kind of what we do. And the good news, by the way, got more good news. It's great. I know. I'm just shocking myself, Jamie. So the good news is we just interviewed for the PAO position for Spokane, and we just completed that yesterday, as a matter of fact. And we do have a candidate that we feel very strongly, actually two. And we are finishing up background work on both of those individuals by next week, and we'll have a selection to our headquarters or our state office by, I'm hoping, next Friday. And there's good news and bad news there. If the individual accepts the position, that's great, but it will take that individual at least 2 months to report to duty, just because family, moving, that sort of thing. But I mean, it's great news that we're going to have someone and they're going to be rolling through. And reason this can happen so fast is we went through a different route. We hired through a veterans outlet. So basically what we did is we wrote a whole bunch of outreach notices to military bases. And we asked, if you're cutting out of the military or the service very soon and you have some of these required skills and abilities, well, then we would love to chat with you and please submit a resume. So what we did is we got resumes at that point. We kind of narrowed it down to some of the top candidates, interviewed those top candidates, and there was definitely some great people on that list. So we're very excited to possibly have someone move over. With that, though, I mean, there's going to be some uptake time. I mean, they've worked solely with the military as a public affairs, so we're going to have to kind of retrain them a little bit to try to get used to what it's like to work for a land managing agency.
Great.
But I think we'll have someone in July, August. That's the good news.
So we might have a lot of people a lot of things filled by July, August, September.
I hope so.
Or September.
That's the hope, right?
Right.
Don't jinx us, Jamie. Don't do that.
Not me. Welcome, Sam.
And those were my updates, right? Yeah, those are my updates.
I think Tracy has something in the chat that's probably good. And on the minutes for the meeting, the way I read whatever the guidance or rules are, is BLM supposed to do the minutes and then the chair checks them and approves them. So I'm just trying to figure out, since we don't have minutes from the last meeting, how should we do this going forward? So we all understand who's doing what.
Yeah, we don't have anybody that's available, I think, to take some of those. I don't know. Is there any thoughts from anybody on how we could possibly get that?
Well, I mean, well, Tracy, looks like you were going to say something, but I mean, we could get the minutes. I just don't want to, I don't want to get hung up in red tape on this. That's all.
Certainly, we're recording this if it's successful and my computer doesn't blow up here. So I consider that kind of the backup, but certainly when Jeff had worked on the meeting minutes, that the recording is the go-to piece to really accurately get those minutes. And that if, I don't know that we have a designated minute taker today, or if we just want to rely on Jamie. I'm taking a few notes here.
Okay.
Anyone else is of our MAC members, great note takers. We could certainly know that you have notes. We've got the recording, and we should figure this out just in the future with the new people coming into BLM. It's great to have a non-MAC member taking notes while we're focused on what everyone is saying and doing.
Yeah, and typically we'd have a PAO doing that. You're right. And Suzanne was not available to be at the meeting today. So we can't do that piece. And, to be honest, Tracy, we also have a reporting criteria of our own that we're supposed to report the meeting notes within, I think, 5 or 6 days too. So I think we got to get that part knocked in also. So.
Right. We do have a 90-day window. That's so like we're 2 days overdue on our February meetings, but we have the recording. We'll hopefully get this recording. And MAC members, anyone want to step forward to take notes today?
Well, Tracy, maybe between you and I, since we're both taking notes, we can put something together.
Okay.
Yeah, and I've got a note to myself to make sure that I check up on that. I could talk to our communications director and figure out, okay, well, what constitutes the notes? I mean, could we just have the recording, or is there like a specific notes that need to be taken, that sort of thing? So I'll make sure I ask about that.
I think
And I'll make sure.
The notes are an important document to send out ahead of the next meeting. It's a really nice synopsis. Most of us would not go back and listen to 4 or 5 hours of recording. So I support having a summary.
I think there's also a legal accessibility issue with just having a recording and not written notes, written minutes.
Mm-hmm.
What was that again, Tom? Sorry.
I think the BLM's minutes have to be accessible to people with disabilities that prevent the video from being sufficient. And so something tells me the video is not the right answer.
Yeah, it's got to be 508 compliant. That's right. That's what we call it. You're right on, Tom. That's exactly what it is.
Right. And I do record the closed caption here at the end, if I get that done, and the chat, which I don't consider part of the minutes, but I can record the chat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's a good point, Jamie and Tom. We'll definitely have the PAO available next time.
Great. Okay. Any other questions for Kurt?
We hope to see you again, Kurt, here in Austin.
Yeah, planning a trip out sometime this summer. We'll see. Either this summer. By the way, my wife absolutely loved the islands. You got to realize where she grew up. That is, she said it seemed like she was absolutely at home. So it's very similar to her as far as climate, as far as everything goes. So yeah, she was even looking at houses. I tried to steer away from that, but just because I don't think I could afford to live there.
No, you get the house, you can use it whenever you want, and we'll rent it out to the seasonal workers.
All right. Yeah, that'll work. All right, thanks.
Thanks, Kurt.
Okay, we're running ahead of schedule, which is always nice. So I'm gonna move right into the Brie's status report on the monument.
Okay. All right. What I have been keeping some notes here so far, of what we've covered so far, but I am a lousy note taker, I'll just tell you. And obviously it's going to be hard for me to take notes on when I'm talking. So I count on you all to cover this. So it sounds like we got that covered anyway, so that's good. So let's see, I've got a whole bunch of bullet points to go through here. We'll start out with staffing, since we've been talking about that. And so I've got a bunch of good news to report on that front. I have made a tentative offer to a seasonal employee who will be living on Lopez. It sounds like she has already found housing. And we're waiting for HR to do the firm offer letter and get the start date going. So I'll be tracking that closely to make sure that we can get her on as soon as possible. And I'm hoping to bring her on this month, but I do understand that the HR just brought on a whole slug of seasonal firefighters, and so we'll have to see where they are in their workflow and how long it will take for the initial background checks. This person has worked for the federal government before, and it sounds like some of that has already been done, and then so we just need to do our side of things and get them onboarded. They're gonna be jumping right into working out in the field. My vision for this person is to not have them really inside much at all. They'll be out on the monument doing public contacts and doing we'll work together to create a schedule to hit all the farmers markets and the fair once we've got a start date, and we can have a conversation together and figure all that out. So that's that with the seasonal position. I am also putting together a team right now to go over applications that we had for a grant opportunity for an internship. And so we will be reviewing the grant applications in the next couple of weeks and making a decision on who we're going to award an internship grant to. So the way this works is organizations apply for this money, and then they take that money and they manage an intern for us. Like, for example, an organization that we work with nationally is the American Conservation Experience. So I'm sure some of you are probably familiar with ACE interns. So we're trying to start something similar to that, where we'll have an intern come in, all of the HR side of things will be managed by, the grantee organization, and we will just worry about providing some developmental experiences and having another person here on the ground with that internship. Separately from that, we're still in the process of figuring out how to bring in some like conservation corps groups and work with the tribal conservation corps and figure out how that's all going to look. Working with groups will be a different project than having this single internship placement. The internship is nice because the grant itself includes a stipend for housing, and that's quite generous. There's the general weekly stipend that the intern would get, as well as I believe it's either $800 a month I think that's what it was, living stipend above their regular stipend. So we're hoping that will help with the, finding the housing and making that all work as well. We'll see how it works.
Ruth has
It's-
a question if you don't.
Yeah, Ruth, give me just a sec, and I'll let me just finish talking about who we're bringing on, and then I'll get to you here in just a sec. So yeah, so that's the internship seasonal. Now we have a permanent employee that we're working on hiring as well. The interviews have been completed. We found a candidate that we liked, and we have made that selection through HR. HR is working through their process, and we expect them to be sending out an offer letter soon to this person. I've had some conversations with them. It sounds like they're very interested, sincerely interested in coming, and will accept that. They do have housing concerns, and it will be a challenge for this person to move here. They have a dog. So finding them suitable housing is going to be the challenge, and probably will be, the decision-making point of whether we can keep them on the hook and have them actually show up and accept the position or not. So we'll try to provide as much support that we can in the housing department. We have some support here from the Park Service to provide them with a landing pad when they get here, and help them in their housing search. So hopefully that will all work out. It's going to be a while yet before we bring this person on. I'm thinking probably this fall would be realistic considering the housing situation. So maybe we can get them to, come here when all of our summer folks are moving out, and that there's some, housing available to rent. So that's that. Ruth?
Thanks, Brie. I'm just curious about the internship. What are the duties and what are the dates for the intern?
So both of those are very flexible. The way I wrote the grant is that the internship itself doesn't have a start or end date. There is a certain time period that the internship will last. I don't remember how long it is, but it is somewhat flexible. And what we would do is we would basically pay out to the sponsor organization for however long that they're managing that intern here. The duties itself, this is going to be a public contact and outdoor, like general park ranger position. But built into the internship is, opportunities for that person to pursue their interests, to develop professionally in the direction that they're going. And so one of the things that they will do as part of this internship is a capstone project. This is an absolutely great place to run something like this, because we have so many different partners who are doing so many different things. And the idea would be to connect this person with whatever mentorship and resources that they need to pursue their interests and develop that capstone project within within that net of doing, the BLM work that we need them to do, which would be learning about how we manage outdoor recreation, basically.
Sounds great. Has it been advertised yet?
No, we haven't awarded the grant to an organization yet. So once we award the grant to the organization, then one of the things that's the part of that grant is that they will be doing the outreach and recruiting.
Can you let us know when it is advertised? I'm connected with a lot of college students, and this sounds wonderful. So I'd like to be able to pass this on if it's appropriate.
Yeah, absolutely. Once we get that awarded and we start looking for candidates, I'll share that information widely with the MAC, with the Tribal Forum, with our partners.
Thanks.
Yeah, thanks for the question. So anything else on staffing before we move on?
good to know things are moving forward, Brie.
Yeah, really right now, my focus has been kind of building our capacity and networks and so as well as, just kind of the logistics of moving the office and getting into the new space. So, it actually does take quite a bit of administrative time to put the interagency agreements together that, the Park Service and the BLM are using to provide this shared space. And, we're looking forward to make sure that we can use that agreement in the most flexible way that will, compensate the park for us being here, support them, and also, provide a mass benefit to us as well. So yeah, and then just moving out of that office has been like its own full-time job. And I'm almost done, so we've got most of the heavy stuff out. If any of you have driven by there recently, you'll see a big roll-off out front that's full of all of our metal recycling. So that'll be disappearing next week. We'll get the place cleaned up and we'll be out of there completely by next weekend. Once that happens, and once I get that seasonal employee on, then I'll actually start to set up the kind of coffee hour times on Lopez, and that'll be opportunities for me to meet my seasonal employee face to face, and also meet anybody out there who's interested. I'll be advertising when I'll be there, directly to the MAC and our partners, as well as putting a notice in Lopez Rocks for that. So that's the move. Let's go on to the next bullet point that's on the agenda, and this is talking about partner organizations, MOUs with our partner organizations, and needs for volunteer agreements and so forth. So this is something that we do need to renew with a lot of our organizations. If some of you are associated with the Keepers of the Peytos, or the monument monitors here on Lopez, you've probably maybe heard me talk about this a bit to those groups. So there's different ways that we can organize our partnerships. And one of those is a memorandum of understanding. We also have agreements, which can be financial agreements, or they can be non-funded agreements. And there's quite a few other ways that we can create formal cooperative relationships. One of the big ones that we need to do, and I'm planning on having some conversations soon, is with the state parks. So Chris Gadati and I have talked about setting aside some substantial time to talk about how we're going to organize that agreement and what it's going to include moving forward. So there's a whole lot of options there, and I really don't have a good sense of where that's going to go right now. Right now, they're providing a lot of support for the BLM, and they basically take us out to our islands whenever we ask, very generously. And so we need to figure out if that's sustainable moving forward, and what kind of procedures we want to put in place to make sure that that their workload isn't overwhelmed, and that they're getting what they need, and that we have a true back and forth partnership. But Chris and I talk rather regularly, and we have a great relationship with state parks right now, even though it is somewhat informal. And that is the case with a lot of the other organizations that we work with as well. And so figuring out which ones that we want to have formal agreements or relationships with is is a big part of what my job is supposed to be and what I will be turning my attentions to moving forward after we get this move and the hiring done. You know, right now I'm doing the job of the outdoor recreation planner, the seasonal park ranger, and the monument manager. And that's a lot. So, you know, I'm prioritizing as best I can. You know, I'm really looking forward to the day where we have a team out here, and you know, the outdoor recreation planner especially can take over a lot of the operations side of things, and I'll be able to focus more on these types of relationships and you know, management. So does anybody have any questions, or was there anything I missed that you wanted to hear about on that topic?
I do have a question, Brie.
Mm-hmm.
Tracy, the MOUs, and I'm certainly just familiar with the keepers, but do they expire as you're transitioning to potentially new ones, or do they stay in place until a new one takes its place?
It depends on the agreement, but generally, yes, they do expire. They do need to be renewed. It's not uncommon for there to be some time in between these the expiration and the renewal, where we try not to let that happen. Keepers of the pedos, I think that the MOU there definitely needs to be renewed. We do have volunteer agreements that are up to date, that are you know, protecting all of the volunteers. And as we move forward, we'll be tightening up that program a little bit, where we'll have you know, our outdoor rec planner is going to be you know, managing that the operations of those programs, and we'll be doing a lot more training and oversight and keeping track of those things. But for the time being, we have a volunteer agreement with the organization, and then each individual volunteer who is going to be working on BLM lands is named, and so that they're part of that volunteer agreement.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Something I need to get
Tom?
off my desk.
Yeah, you mentioned the volunteer agreement, and that sounds like a way of handling those issues in the absence of a broader MOU. Are there other things that we should be aware of that are missing during that lapsed period between the old MOU and a new one, in terms of anything from grant availability to whatever? What am I not thinking of that might be problematic during the period without an MOU?
Not that I'm aware of. I mean, if there was a grant opportunity that an organization wanted to apply for, we could, you know, simply write a letter of recommendation or a letter of support. The MOU is kind of establish, you know, the responsibilities of each entity and how we're going to manage our partnership. They would include the volunteer agreements. So even if we had an MOU, we'd still do volunteer agreements. So yeah, I'm not thinking of anything off the top of my head, but I actually I need to go and review the specific MOUs and refresh myself and see if there's anything that we need to address sooner than later. But I can't think of anything right now.
Okay, thanks.
Tracy, did you have something else?
No, I was just kind of thinking all the things we could do before a new MOU is out there, and it was just tongue in cheek. We could go do a bunch of repairs. We could set up a new yurt for our docents, right? All those things that I'm just kidding.
Speaking of a yurt, I might have access to a cabin, a really, really, really nice canvas cabin tent that we might be able to put at the docent site if you all are interested. I know that's a digression, but
No,
yeah,
let's talk. It wouldn't probably, yeah, there was our previous folks running the KOPL that had determined a different site, and they got quite far into researching that. So it isn't a new concept. So, but it probably wouldn't fit into the regular docent campsite, but somewhere else that's tucked in and out of the view of the water and so forth.
Gotcha. Oh, that's the first I've heard of that, but yeah, I'm curious.
Yeah, we can update you. And in terms of what the resource management plan, that was really the restricting piece, that we did not have that plan in place as the thoughts of a yurt were happening.
Yeah, the management plan will allow us to really start working on making some, site improvements and so forth to support, our maritime heritage areas, all the lighthouses, etc. So that's kind of exciting to be able to start moving forward on those projects.
Well, I've written a big star next to canvas tents, so I think
All
that's
right,
something
awesome.
when you're freed up with some time. That's great. Don't give it away anywhere else.
Okay.
But it could be seasonal work, housing too, for the summer if need be.
Something I have thought about. So, yeah, okay. So next on the agenda here, we've got, how will outreach and education be conducted to help determine priorities? Yeah, I don't have a lot of info for you all at this point on that. These are questions that I myself have. And I think we probably need to have some more conversations internally about how we want to do our implementation strategies. The good thing is we've got some new planners that are coming on board in the BLM, and then the increases in our staff will give us the people power to work on this. One thing we have been doing, is having conversations and educational presentations like the one I did at the annual terrestrial managers group meeting, where I guess I'm trying to get a sense of what the community wants to know, and what we need to do a better job communicating as far as our process and what the management plan actually is and isn't. And so kind of started there. I do have that presentation here for you this morning. And so we'll go through and I'll show you the slides that I showed to the terrestrial managers group. And hopefully that can spark some conversation or some ideas. I think a lot of these priorities are really determined kind of operationally and planning process wise. Like, we have to look at what we have the capacity to do, what we might be able to get done quickly and without a lot of wait time, so that we can start implementing things. There are projects that are already kind of happening that are small scale, but those larger scale, like planning and step down guidance documents still needs quite a bit of strategizing and figuring out what we need to do first. We're having some deep conversations with the tribes on and asking for their feedback about this, and that will be one of the major considerations on the kind of the order and the strategy that we use for our implementation. We also have to think about what plans might help other plans, and what we can do. Like, for example, if we have a large scale forestry project that there is a lot of money for, that's going to push for, that particular planning and implementation. Because a lot of times when there are targeted funds that come through the Department of Interior, or even the state to manage, certain issues. And if there's pots of money available, then we're going to, reprioritize, re-strategize at any point that we get that information and jump on that. So, I think those are a couple of things that are going to drive things moving forward. We also have to look at if there are impacts that are happening that we need to manage quickly. So, conditions on the ground are a big part of that as well. Jamie?
I was just wondering, you were saying there's some small scale projects that are happening. I was just wondering if you could maybe give a few examples. So
Yeah.
everybody on the MAC would know what's happening.
Mm-hmm. So I think one that I've mentioned before is the, Watmau land acquisition to manage a small corner of private property that the existing access road is driving through. And so that's been in the works for quite some time and is actually going through its process with Realty right now. And as part of that acquisition, we also had to do a categorical exclusion document, which is a type of, it's funny, it's a NEPA analysis, National Environmental Policy Act analysis, that basically says that, what we're doing here is a very small scale, is not going to have an impact on the ground, and we don't need to do an environmental assessment or, or anything that's, more involved. And so we're doing a categorical exclusion, which is the NEPA, and then, we're working through our purchase process to get this little piece of land to basically resolve a trespass. Let's see, what other small scale projects do we have going on? Well, I think moving forward, there's others that we'll probably do. One of those things is signing. We have some, we're trying to increase our visitor use data integrity by putting out more counters and trying to get some better information, on some of our areas about who's using what and where. So like, for example, in Cattle Point, we now have 2 visitor use counters up, one at the kind of established social trail where everybody pulls over and hops the fence and walks out across the meadow, and then one at the official trailhead as well, so that we can kind of track how many people are going in there and get an idea of I mean, this data is going to be really important when we start to do implementation there, like when we start to do our travel and transportation planning, or if we decide we need a parking lot, or if the county decides that they don't want us parking on the shoulder, and I do think long term, like, we don't want to be parking on the shoulder there. So we have to figure out how we're gonna, allow for access there if we're going to. And so, getting this data is just an important kind of pre-step. What else is going on? We have, some maintenance activities at the lighthouses that we're trying to keep on top of. And so, I've had engineers come out and visit and do our site assessments. And so, they identify anything that needs to happen to make sure that we're protecting the structures. So there, there's long-term plans that our engineers are helping with, that are making sure that we have the funding and that we'll be able to put contracts in a timely manner to move forward with getting things done, like repainting the lighthouse. And so those things are moving forward as well.
Thank you.
Excuse me, I'm getting a little hoarse this morning.
I don't know if you saw in the chat, there was a question in the chat.
Yeah, hold on, let me pull that up. No, yeah, so the question in the chat is, so for the Watmau Road acquisition project, does this also discuss where the trail between Chadwick Hill and Watmau crosses private property. So no, this really no, that individual wasn't interested in selling the portion of the property, which is kind of the opposite corner where the trail crosses a private property, and they're really not too excited about the trail. It has actually yards from their back porch. I have looked at the trail, and I have other concerns about it. And so whether that trail remains feasible or that's something that we're going to keep open will be something that we'll be discussing in a lot of detail when we get to that travel and transportation planning. But yeah, I don't even know if we want to keep this trail or not. And so I think that's going to be I think that's going to be a big topic of conversation. We'll have to think about how we're going to manage it, because he's not really interested in having that trail across his private property, although at the moment he's tolerating it. And so, yeah, a lot of complex issues there, but that'll be an entirely different conversation than this one. Okay, moving on. Okay, so now we've got some bullet point questions just about kind of these are sort of getting into like how we're going to do implementation. And I do want to start this report out with this sort of a caveat that I am not a planner. I'm a generalist. I know about planning, but we have folks that we rely on to tell us in more detail how this needs to get done. But I do know, some of the nitty gritty nuts and bolts of this, but the broad overview of planning and the way that the BLM manages its planning right now, it's always changing, and we have experts that are up to date on that stuff. So if there's any questions that I can't answer, I will find out, or as we dig into this more, we can, maybe include some planners in these conversations. Okay, so I'm going to pull up my slideshow now. I think this would be a good time to go through the slides. Kurt?
Yeah, just real quick. It would be great to have a planner if we had one. Unfortunately, we don't. We haven't had a planner for the Spokane district for, I think we're going on a little more than a year now. And we just tried to hire one, and we went out, we actually chose someone, and then they stopped communicating with us. So I don't know what happened there, but so we're going to have to re-advertise that and try to get it all the way back out and try to rehire it. So yeah, that obviously that's slowing us down. It's going to take quite a bit of time, but I just wanted to let everybody know that that's hindering us, stuff like that.
Bummer. Oh, okay. I hadn't heard that they had backed out. I was excited for.
I know.
Okay. All right. Let's see if this works. There was a beep. I take that as a positive sign. I'm assuming everybody can see a PowerPoint presentation with kind of a topographical map background.
Yep.
Yes.
All right, great. Success with technology. Love it. Okay. I just have to figure out how to advance the slides. Let's try. Nope. Okay, here we go. All right, so this is the presentation that I showed the terrestrial managers group. I think we don't need to spend a lot of time on some of these slides. I think you all know the fundamentals of the our monument and how it's established, and I do want to put that reminder there that our authority to manage the land ends at that mean high tide level, and so we do coordinate and collaborate with those entities that do have authority on the water, but we don't manage anything except for the land. So right now, yeah, the staff includes me, soon to be hired rec planner, seasonal park ranger, interns. At the moment, there's nothing saying that we can't beg and ask for more staff or establish partnerships that will hopefully increase our capacity even more. Then we talked a little bit about what the RMP is, that it's this, you know, framework that basically provides management direction for keeping public landscapes healthy and productive. It is required by the National Environmental Policy Act, or NEPA. And it also acts as the that environmental impact statement. And so the oh, and something I forgot to mention, the hard copies of the RMP came in, and so I will be sending those out to those of you who've requested them soon. And if you want more copies or anything, just let me know. I'll be happy to bring those over or send them out to you. Okay, so yeah, so the environmental impact statement is what creates that management decision. The RMP is basically the executive summary of that environmental impact statement. So I do want to point out that the RMP is a living document, so we can make changes to our plan. I'm sorry, I'm reading my notes. They're way over my side monitor, so that's why I'm not looking at the screen. There's a couple of ways that we can make changes in the plan in response to changing conditions or new information that we find. Plan revisions and plan amendments can be used to update the RMP if the need arises. If that happens, it's usually because there's new scientific knowledge about the environmental health of an area or some, you know, huge change. If that happens, then we do need to do or if there's failure to meet the land health standards set out in the original plan. Those are some things that can trigger those plan amendments. If there's requests for land use that were not considered in the original plan, that's not something that's going to happen here. And we're talking about massive landscapes where suddenly, you know, they want to establish like a high powered or a high tension line or something, you know, across the desert landscape. So if we do a plan amendment, it does require a full environmental impact statement. So it's definitely not a small undertaking, but can be done if the need arises. We also can do plan maintenance. Plan maintenance basically addresses oversights or errors or omissions of you know, that are minor in nature and don't generally impact the meaning or direction that the document was intending. And that's something that we do at certain intervals. And then that is when we decided that we would address the errata sheets that you all have helped me compile, which I am very grateful for. Okay, so we're talking about what's in the RMP. So the RMP establishes the vision, establishes the framework for site management and allowable decisions. And so this is what we've worked with you all to create, you know, and a lot of that was inspired by the Monument Proclamation, as well as the intentions of the community and what they hoped for on the landscapes here. So the proposed RMP, we focus on promoting ecological resilience, resistance to threats, including fire, drought, and other potential disturbances. I think you all know most of this. I think we talked about the changes between the proposed and the final in the last meeting, so I won't go over that, but that's something that I talked about a little bit here with the Trustro Managers Group. This vision statement was crafted by the Monument Advisory Committee meeting, or the Monument Advisory Committee. I think is really good. All right, so the RMP, establishes these goals for our management moving forward. The goals of the RMP that we identified here are protecting the cultural and historic values for which the monument was designated, and protecting the ecological values for which the monument was designated. So those are the two overarching goals in our management plan. Right, so then we talk about what an RMP is not. The RMP only applies to BLM land. It doesn't apply to other federal entities, state or private lands. So even though, and this is, I know a lot of you are aware of the confusion that our maps created when we had this broad outline that was around the entire San Juan archipelago, which was considered the planning area, but the plan itself only is on, the public lands that we manage. Okay, so what we still need to do is all that project level NEPA analysis. And so that's going to be required for most of our implementation actions. We will be tiering to the work that was done in the environmental impact statement and in other past planning documents that we've created for the monument. Each undertaking will require some level of NEPA, probably mostly at the EA level, at the environmental assessment level, I'm guessing. Although there's a lot of things that we can do with these categorical exclusions. Categorical exclusions that are things that are kind of exempt from that deeper NEPA process. There are basically certain things that we kind of do on a regular basis that the department or the BLM has established as being excluded from these NEPA analysis. They're listed online. If you're curious, let me know and I can show you where we are, or we can have conversations online about what they are. So we need to still establish rules or restrictions, and this is a big one. I'll get into that more in just a sec. That goes back to the bullet point that was on our agenda. Again, we talked about the changes in the final RMP. These were the things that I was hearing a lot from the public on that were grave concerns, and that everybody was kind of holding their breath to see what would happen with. And so these were the big changes that happened in the final RMP. So, and I think it was really smart what y'all did, and especially with the target shooting, was that the language was adjusted to be very clear to prohibit target shooting within hunting season as well as outside of hunting season. And so the language says the discharge or use of a firearm or other dangerous weapon, example bow and arrow, projectile weapons, etc., will not be allowed within the monument. And this is great because a lot of planning groups miss this, and they just list firearms, kind of forgetting that a firearm is a very specific thing, that it shoots an explosive cartridge, and that we have like a BB gun is not a gun, it's not a firearm, it's a projectile weapon. So that was great that they covered all of that. The law enforcement background in me really wants to give y'all kudos for making that happen. Amy?
Hey, I just wanted to clarify the dispersed camping because we get this question all the time. Because people think they're like, oh, well, you have BLM land, I can camp there. So unless it's a designated campsite, like on one of the outer islands, there's no camping on BLM lands on the ferry served, correct?
Correct.
That's what I thought, but I just wanted to hear you say it.
Yep. So this basically, and that's actually a great segue, right? We've decided that we're not going to allow dispersed camping within the national monument. And so the next thing we need to do probably is create tools to enforce that if the need ever arises. All right, let me find my little arrow here. All right, so implementation. So this is, we've said what we'd like to do. Now we have to go and do it. So I think, like I've mentioned before, the order of our implementation is going to be informed a lot by our capacity. by our budget, by our partner involvement and interests and administration priorities, as well as, what the public's expectations are and what the community are pushing for. Right now, there's a focus on forest health within the BLM. So, and I think there's a focus on forest health within most Western states and land management organizations. And so, like I mentioned before, there may be project funds available to do forestry projects out here that meet certain programmatic guidelines, like create climate resiliency or reduce wildfire risks. So if that turns out to be the case, we're definitely going to take advantage of that. And so, not that I've heard of anything specific, but I know that I had some conversations with our fire management officer, which has indicated that there might be some of that going on. And so, let's say that was the case, then we would take a look at what we need to, what implementation plans that we have that we've outlined that we would need to tackle to make those happen. There's actually quite a laundry list of them, right? Because we have site-specific vegetation plans that we've identified as something we're going to do in the RMP. We've also got, those overarching goals of the RMP to protect the cultural and historical resources, as well as the natural environment. And so there's cultural resource protection plans that we would need to take a look at. There's so much. So figuring out what to do first, even if we wanted to do something like a forest health project or plan, is going to be a big undertaking. So here's the list. This is the list of implementation level plans that that the RMP has identified. And so, yeah, figuring out which of these nest above others, and I mean, there's sort of a web of connections going on here, and so, I think, like, knowing how other offices have kind of stalled out with stuff like this, if we start to think too big or broad, or get too afraid of making mistakes or implementation, it can really paralyze us. And so what we're going to have to just figure out how to do is to take small manageable bites of this and just start doing work and just start seeing some implementation activities on the ground. But yeah, it's going to require a lot of thought and planning and conversations between the BLM and the public, the MAC, all of our tribal partners, our external partners. I mean, there's just so much going on here already, as you all know. And one of the good things, though, is that like there's certain things here, like site-specific management plans for vegetation and vegetation monitoring plans that many of our partners are actually doing. And so we can emulate their work, which is something that we'll want to do anyway, because we want to work with our partners. That's the entire kind of reason of the terrestrial managers group, is to manage our resources here on the landscape level. And so being able to figure out what they're doing that works well, and whether it would fit our needs, and then implementing the science that they've already done is going to really help us out a lot. I'm particularly excited about some of the management activities that the land bank is doing. We actually went on a tour with my Park Service colleagues of one of their sites, and they explained in detail on some of the forestry projects they were doing to protect Gary Oak and to protect other large old growth trees, and the types of thinning they were doing, how they were managing the biomass that they're creating with that thinning, and it was and how they're using that to create artificial deadfalls that create habitat. I mean, there's just a lot of really cool stuff that's happening out there. And we also have some private landowners who are doing some really amazing forest health work on their lands as well. And so there's a lot of great resources out there for that. I'm really excited about digging into doing that work. And we've also got a great forester out of the Wenatchee office who's excited to come out here and help out with that. So for example, that's an example of things that we need to do. So recreation management area plans, this is like the fourth bullet down. I did want to kind of pull that one out a little bit here too. So these are our site-specific step-down planning, management planning for sites, and are questions about like how a recreation management area plan down at Watmow connects to the travel management and travel management planning that we need to do, and how we're going to connect those and make sure that we're not having to do the work twice is, as part of the way that we're going to strategize the implementation of these things. Is there any questions so far? We're still ahead of schedule, but I feel like I've been talking a lot, so I'm sorry if I'm boring y'all. Please, feel free to speak up at any time.
So Brie, I was wondering, and I might be coming to it, but when you were talking about, well, two things. One is how to implement the closures that are spelled out in the RMP. And the second is something that Tracy had sent out from Cindy about which ties in, like Richardson Rocks and how we do that. And then also signage. Is that something that would be happening? Like you said, it's low budget and can be happening right away, or could be happening right away. I'm not sure is happening.
Yeah, so I have seen that there's some sign needs where we probably need to would be better sooner or later. One particular issue that I saw was just like how people are parking down at Watmow, where they're blocking the road, and so they're creating a situation where we couldn't get an ambulance or a fire truck down there if we needed to, which always makes a land manager uncomfortable. And also, like last summer, one day when I went down there, like this person had actually like parked like 3 or 4 cars in, and they couldn't leave until they had to go find the person to get them to move their vehicle. So I'd love to put some signs up to ask the public not to park on the road, to ask the public to park in the designated parking spots and not along that back edge that parallels the marsh down there. And and then we have to figure out the messaging on how to tell people, like, if the parking lot's full, please come back later. We will still need to do a categorical exclusion and figure out if we have the necessary cultural surveys done to be able to sync signposts where we think we might need them. And but yeah, that's something that I want to do. So let me move on to the next slide. I could talk about this a little bit more. So this gets into the supplemental rule making. So supplemental rules are the BLM's version of the National Park Service's Superintendent's Compendium. Our agency administrators are authorized to make rules that are enforceable by enforceable with the criminal, what's the word? I'm so sorry. I keep losing my words. That there could be criminal consequences. For example, like our supplemental rules are all class A is misdemeanors, which means that once we make a supplemental rule, an enforcement action can be taken up to a certain dollar amount, which I believe Class A misdemeanors, it's been a while since I've thought about this, is up to $5,000 or a year, up to a year in prison. So since this does have some criminal consequences behind it, we can't just write down a criminal rule in our notebooks and start, writing people tickets on it. There's quite a process to make those supplemental rules. And so what we've done in the RMP is we've identified where we want to make certain rules, such as supplemental rules, or we want to put certain closures in place. We really have to go through a careful process to vet the rules that we write and make. And so one of those things is that they need to be published in the Federal Register. In order for that to happen, that supplemental rule first, goes through, is written by the manager to deal with whatever resource issue, we're trying to prevent or address. And then once those rules are written, then they're going to be evaluated by our law enforcement leadership. They're going to be evaluated by our solicitor's office. Then they're going to go through state and bureau level reviews to make sure that they are in compliance with all of our enabling legislations, our rules and regulations, that they are also do not contradict any other rule or regulation that we might make, that we have the authority to do it, that it doesn't conflict with state or federal or local laws. Once that all happens and it's published in the Federal Register, then we need to post that, post those supplemental rules where the public can see them on our website and in the area where they're going to be enforced in order to be able to take an enforcement action on them. So supplemental rules can be a great tool, but they do require a lot to enforce. And especially since one of those things is posting those supplemental rules in the areas where they're enacted, can create some challenges if we don't want to put a sign there, for example. And so, any law enforcement ranger will tell you that taking an enforcement action is a last resort. And we can get pretty good compliance using our stewardship messaging, our environmental interpretation. The park rangers can get 90% of the compliance they need just by asking people to comply. And so going back to the example of not having people park against parallel to the marsh at Watmau, like we're not going to create an enforceable rule that says you can only park in designated spaces. Right now, what we're just going to do is put up the no parking signs, and we're going to ask people to comply with them without having to resort to an enforcement action. But that tool is there. There are places in the RMP where we've said we're going to do that. And so we'll write those supplemental rules, but it's not going to be something that happens, just by the fact that it was written into the RMP. We still need to go through the process. And it's not something that I think is a super high priority because we don't have situations where there's these three things in place, where we have repeated violations that are impacting the environment, where we have the enforcement personnel who are in place to make enforcement contacts and issue citations, actually there's two things. So since those two things are not easy to get in place, then it doesn't make the rule making part of this a super high priority. It would be better to work on that environmental and interpretive plan where we're going to decide where we're going to want signs, how we're going to engage the public, how we're going to tell the public what our expectations are about how they should be helping us protect the resources here. And I think that's really where we want to focus first.
With that though, well, there is something in the chat from Sally, a question, but just to go with that, but absent the rulemaking, you can still put up a sign and hope people comply. Would that be the plan for some of these rocks?
I'm sorry, Jamie, say that one more time.
Well, it sounded, what you said is like with the parking, you can put up signs and hope people comply, and which is not, it's, then we're not doing enforcement. So could that same thing apply to some of the rocks that are supposed to be closed? It's just, say this, some sort of signage, and then hope people comply. I mean, I'm one of those realists. We're never going to get 100%, but if you can reduce most of it just by a sign. So could that happen? Could it be done that way?
Yeah, I mean, I really think that's the way it should be done. There's a lot of things that we'll ask ourselves when we're trying to manage public use, and what are the unintended consequences of putting a sign up that might be visible, by boat? Is it going to make people want to go over and read the sign, for example? How are we going to inform the public that these rocks and islands are closed? How many of them are actually getting visited, and are those visits causing environmental or cultural, resource degradation? Like, these are all management decisions that we need to make, and I actually just need more information to be able to know. And one thing I really need to do is go get eyes on these places and see what they're like, and probably really need to focus on establishing some kind of regular monitoring that's going to happen there, which will be a lot easier once we have that ORP on board. We'll have a regular monitoring schedule. We'll have some kind of way of tracking changes, or looking for impacts. And then we can also establish some trigger points where we want to make some management actions, but take some management actions. But yeah, I think really what we really need to focus on is just public education, and I think most people will comply. My understanding is that Fish and Wildlife Service gets pretty good compliance in their closures, and so we probably want to emulate them and try to get that same messaging out. I would think.
So there's a couple of things in the chat.
Okay, yeah. Slide shows the RMP established no rule or restriction on its own, but are recreation management area plans needed before things can happen on the ground? I've heard at other MAC meetings, BLM can put in a new trail now, allow equestrian trails at Chadwick now, and similar. How does this happen before the RMA plan is adopted? So that's kind of a yes and no. So I think when we say that we can do that now, we can do that because the RMP is in place and we have that direction. We'd still have to go through the process. So I would imagine if we were talking about making big changes, for at Chadwick, for example, we probably want to do the recreation area management planning. But if there's specific subsets of recreation that we need to manage first, like if we have, I don't know, if we need to manage equestrian use, then, we could actually tackle that through travel and transportation management planning, which would establish, like the trail use specifically. So I think there's a couple different ways we could go at that and get the same thing, but we do need to go through the process one way or the other. Can we inform the public through work? For example, the Visitors Bureau, even without specific rulemaking? Yes, absolutely. Yes, we can tell them what our intended management decisions were, and we can focus on that stewardship message to ask them to comply, with the best use practices for responsible recreation and leave no trace, for sure. That's maybe something that Amy and you and I should have a conversation about sooner than later. Kurt?
Yeah, just a couple things, Bree. That the last question, Tom's question, you hit it right on it, pretty much, Bree. We can say we prefer folks not to go out there and explain the why, right? But we can't tell folks it's closed. I mean, until it's closed, we can't use the term, right? I mean, that's an important distinction to make because we don't have any legal enforceable authority at that point yet, still, right? And then to Sally's question, I still think we would need a TMP first before we establish any trail. So we could not go in and put a trail in at this time.
Sally, yeah, oops. I think I might have forgotten to list that there. I don't know, is it not in the RMP? If it isn't in the RMP, I mean, I know there at one point it was, they were trying to include the travel and transportation management planning in the RMP process and then later on decided to move it out of there.
Yes.
In any case, it's something that we need to do.
Yeah, so to that, Bree, I'm sorry to
Yeah.
interrupt, but to
No,
that
go ahead.
point, I mean, I did go through some of the folks that were very involved with that, and you're right on. We were going through the travel management, but we never had it signed. So there is no approved travel management. So I know there are some pieces in the RMP that talk about this specific or that specific, where we can have equestrian work it, but none of that is enforceable at this time. None of it, because there is no signed travel management plan. And because we have no signed travel management plan, we technically don't have any enforcement ability. So the good piece of that, though, and I hope everybody hears this, is we have a lot of research that we've already done. I would say we're probably 60% of the way through that already. So that's great that we have all this information and we have some of it in our RMP. But until we finished a travel management plan and have that signed, none of that could technically be enforced at this point. So just wanted to make sure that that was clear, because I know that was a question last time at the MAC meeting, and I just wanted to make sure that folks knew that I went back, chatted with some folks, clarified where we were and where we finished with that.
Thanks, Kurt. Yeah,
Sure.
so does that bring up any other questions or anything anybody would like to mention?
Bree, Tom put something in the chat.
Yeah. So
Yeah, I'm just personally frustrated by the decision having been made to not allow public access on certain sites, but simultaneously, actually on that page, Bree, if you're doing the search reviews little thing, down.
Yep.
Yeah, down lower, you can search in the reviews and just type Lummi Rocks, and it talks about, oh, we had this lovely organized trip out to Lummi Rocks with this outfitter. It was wonderful. I highly recommend it. And I'm just concerned that we, BLM, the public, et cetera, have decided that this is a place that should not be open to, and not that one, down further. No, this is still Lummi Island. There's a specific mention of Lummi Rocks in one of them.
Okay,
I think
maybe I
that
need
you may
to
have to
actually
change your
search for that.
search.
Okay.
Yeah, otherwise you'll get Lummi Island everywhere. And you know, where the usage is going to continue, if not grow, thanks to the joys of the internet, unless we find ways of informing people that this is not to be done. And you know, maybe we don't say closed, maybe we say that the resource management plan says that public access should not be allowed here. Therefore, please, you know, I would encourage you to not do this, which is a hand wave to say, rather than saying it's closed, but it's a way of adding a comment to some of these sites that says, you know, historically, yeah, but no more.
Yeah, okay, so I guess, I understand the frustration. It's something that I definitely share. But I think there's other ways we can look at some of this use, like this here is a commercial outfitter. They need to have a permit. We're not gonna give them a permit for a place where we don't want people to go. So probably this is just as simple as me reaching out to them, making sure that they're not landing on the rocks. And then, you know, trying to do some compliance checks when I know that they have trips out there, try to be in the area and do some observations. And if they're actually landing there, then we can take enforcement actions based on rules and regulations that we already have in place. So we don't actually need to do a closure for this particular situation because we can manage it using existing rules and regulations that we have. And that might be the case with a lot of the stuff. If there's a lot of use going on in a certain place, then putting the closure itself isn't going to actually change the use. We got to figure out how to change the human behavior. And that's something that I think we really need to take a look at. And then if there's places where we're getting like an individual who like let's say an outfitter who is egregiously and continuously non-complying despite knowing the rules, then we'll have to take action on that. And then, like I said, in this particular case, we can use our SRP, you know, our requirements that they have a valid SRP, special recreation permit, sorry. But cool, this is great info, thank you. Yeah, and I need to go out and I need to get hands-on, eyes on these places so that I can understand the management decisions there. Hopefully that's something that we can have time to set up this summer and take care of. But if there's anything that's causing degradation, we've got plenty of tools in our toolbox to be able to deal with those issues right away as we work through, you know, the closures and putting our other tools in place that we'll be able to use as well. So yeah, it's gonna take some time, you know, especially because I'm still the only person out here because we're still trying to get up to full staffing, because in order to go through a lot of these processes, I do need to rely on you know, the Wenatchee interdisciplinary team, ID team, which is going to help me do all of the NEPA analysis. And I do have them engaged for quite a bit this summer, them as well as state specialists will be coming out to start doing some of the pre-work and getting familiar with the resource so that we can really start digging into this stuff. So it is in the works. It's going to take some time. The closures themselves, I got to refresh myself on how this whole thing works, and probably have some conversations with Kurt like that to make sure that I'm on the same page and that I understand. But I don't think that like the closures themselves, getting those in place will be a huge undertaking. I think that's something that we'll be able to do relatively quickly. So yeah.
So, Brie, I just wanted to ask a question of Amy, since we're on this, how to educate, and since that's your bailiwick, Amy, if you don't want to put you on the spot, but do you have any ideas on how to get the word out on some of these, you know, where we don't want people to be going, and particularly the idea of historical use? I know when we put the plan together, that was you know, a big topic is where people had historically gone, would that be closed or open? So if you don't mind, Brie, I just thought Amy might have some
great
inspiration.
Well, thank you, Jamie. And I was just going to say first, as far as kayak outfitters go, Brie, if that sounds like you and I need to touch base on who has those special recreation permits, and if anyone doesn't, and you would like me to reach out, since I know that's you might not have time, I am happy to do so, just to say, you know, this is a monument, and please to limit use, or, you know, however whatever messaging we want to send. Yeah, I would say in terms of you know, as far as historical use, and now things might be closed, gets a little trickier. But say when in doubt, maybe there's things we can use through our website, whether it's on the particular pages, with one of our, you know, if it's a hiking page, if it's kayaking, or whatnot. But my go-to is always humor. People respond way more to that than like, oh, this is closed, don't do this. So I'm sorry, I don't have anything more specific right this minute. But that's certainly something I would be happy to work with Brie on.
I do want to say that Amy is really good at reaching out, and we've collaborated a lot on having conversations about you know, the content that the monument wants or doesn't want in outreach projects that the Visitors Bureau creates. And so Amy does a great job on that. And you know, I think we started even having these conversations last year, as you know, as far as like what content should be in there. So yeah. And Erin, you do quite a bit of public outreach and education as well. Did you have anything to add? So let's see, and it's I didn't mention this. Our Ellie is coming out next week for a site visit. This is something I should have mentioned in my update. They're coming out next week, and we're gonna hopefully meet up and start chatting about some of these issues. You know, the special recreation permits, there are none. There are no valid special recreation permits in the monument right now. And so if there's an outfitter, either a photographer that's visiting us, you know, on the ferry served islands, or folks that are going out and visiting any of our rocks, or even nonprofit organizations that are doing walks and talks and you know, like on Indian Island, for example, require coordination with us, a special recreation permit or a letter of authorization or an MOU or something like that. And so I have been doing outreach to some organizations, including some of the bicycle outfitters who I've sent very nice notes to, just telling them that, you know, what they are allowed to do and what they're not. I haven't got around to the kayak outfitters yet. But I did try to do some photographer compliance down at Cattle Point a couple days ago, because I'd heard about a trip from a member of the public that was down there. I missed them, but there are foxes down there, and so I expect that we'll see those commercial photography groups, and I'll run into them sooner or later. Over time, we're gonna educate them. The need for a special recreation permit on public lands, for some reason, I don't know if it's actually like people know and they pretend they don't, or they're just, we have troubles with this all over the place. Here though, it's going to be a lot easier to manage than the wide open, you know, landscapes of the desert Southwest, because we just have a lot of eyes on. So we'll be able to monitor, figure out who's operating, have conversations with them, either get them under a special recreation permit or encourage them not to operate without one. You know, especially once we get our park ranger and our outdoor rec planner out there in the field quite a bit, I think that'll happen pretty quickly.
Tracy.
Hey, thanks, Brie. And I'm already hearing from two different friends, one from Seattle, one from the Metau, that have signed up for kayak trips to get out to Patos, and coming via, you know, from Lummi Island. And if there was a write-up that I could send out, because one is through the Mountaineers, and they certainly have trained leaders, but let me know if I should just flag it, if there was anything we could send out, either as individuals or direct them to you with questions, that would be really helpful. Including to have something for our docents on Paytos to be able to just even have a little handout to give to the group leader to say, hey, for your next trip, here's some great information you may want to read.
Definitely. And I think we want to provide a lot of education to the folks who are making public contacts on our behalf in the future. And so that's something I feel very strongly about is providing training to any volunteer who's going to be doing who's going to be doing any kind of public contacts. And so that's something that we need to do sooner than later. Just figuring out how to get that in place with everybody's schedules has been kind of challenging, because I know I just I've been so tied up with trying to move out of the office right now that my schedule is pretty full. And then I'm also kind of in the middle of having some surgery. So yesterday I went to the tribal forum, and I was actually zooming in from the examining room at the hospital with the farm. And so yeah, things are a little busy right now, but these are all things that we will do. And again, once we have that outdoor rec planner on board, our staff is going to increase by 100%. And so our ability to do these things is going to be vastly increased, and that's coming soon. And so, and even this summer with when Rebecca gets on board, we'll be having, we'll get her trained up. Hopefully she'll come back again next year. We're going to make it so great out here that she's going to want to be here forever. And then we need to develop our partner capacities too. And so actually training, KOPL to be able to provide training for its volunteers and things like that. Of course, there'll be heavy BLM involvement, regardless, but, capacity building is kind of fun because we start with this base level of where we're just really just taking care of the things that need to happen today. But it's kind of exponential in the way that once you start building a little capacity, that gives you more time to build more capacity. And it's like an explosion. And so the next couple of years, you're really going to see things take off here.
So Brie, there's a note in the chat from Ruth about her contacts. And I think it really points out, just in the conversation that we've had, is there's a lot of resources in the MAC that could, that can assist you in getting this word out once we know what the actual word should be, what the actual wording should be.
Yes, that is a great form of outreach, and we can even do things like, provide opportunities for them to come engage with us and, and build some community there. And that can be very powerful in helping to create allies within these user groups. This is something that I have a lot of experience with climber groups. And I have done a bit of outreach in the marine environment with kayaking groups too. And I think this is a great idea. This summer, we actually plan on, once my seasonal gets on, we plan on taking some kayak training together and starting to connect with these groups, offering, I think in the future, probably not this summer, but in future years, we can offer some docent-led experiences for folks to start engaging those clubs and building some ties so that they can help us with our messaging. I think that is like the most powerful way that we can get compliance, because we know who's going to come, right? It's the kayakers. It's just like with the climbers. We know who's going to come to the cliff. It's the climbers. We know who they talk to. We know who they look up to. And so if we can engage those people and get them to amplify our messaging, that's great. Something that the department is looking at doing I can't remember if this is the bureau or the department level. Amy, you have some experience with this. We're trying to engage with influencers that are influential with specific communities out there in the social media realm. And so there's things that are happening at our department level where they're looking for folks, and they've asked some of us from the field, especially those folks of us who do a lot with equity in the outdoors, to identify some potential influencers that can help spread our message. And I think Amy and I have even talked about this maybe real briefly, about, because she's engaging influencers. Amy, you're there. You can tell us about that a little.
Brie, if that was a question, I think I missed it. Sorry, I have a
car
wash next door.
No worries. I was just mentioning that, you're working with influencers to try to get your message out. And then that's just a powerful way that we can engage on social media. It's something that I don't think the Department of Interior has done much in the past. The Park Service has experimented with it a little bit, but no, I think that the BLM is looking at doing that. So, but anyway, the point is that we're engaging with specific user groups through their peers, which is just like what Ruth said. Anyway, I'm talking too much on that. So we are actually kind of in our working discussion now. I don't know if you all noticed we transitioned kind of into that. But
Ruth, do you have anything to add? I mean, you put the comment in. Okay. Oh, there she is.
Sorry, Jamie, my mute button got stuck. Yeah, no, my experience is working with leadership of different groups and, practicing a lot of active listening, because closures are very threatening to people. But good presentations explaining why the change is necessary, and as Brie says, involving those people and helping us figure out how to execute a change works a whole lot better than coming in and saying, well, the plan's done, we've got it all figured out, you can't go there anymore. So yeah, as Amy and Brie know, there's a lot of psychology to it, but I'm pretty optimistic that working with the communities that use these places is the way to implement the changes and develop positive relationships as well.
Great.
love it.
So we have kind of transitioned into the kind of the group discussions here, but we missed our break about an hour ago. So I would suggest that we take a quick 10-minute break, or maybe 7-minute break, be back at 11. And we'll pick up the discussion where we left off. And I just wanted to note that we have a full Mac, Genevieve, Sam Barr, and Jay Havner all have joined us in the course of the meeting. So we'll see you at 11 o'clock. Here we are. Okay. Let's get going again. Welcome back, everybody. So Brie, are you back?
I'm here.
I'm just wondering, there were a few things in the chat during our break. And I
Oh,
didn't
okay,
know if you wanted to comment on those.
Let me pull that open. Show.
Yeah. There's the property at Cape St. Mary and access, I guess, and the impact of herbicide and pesticide runoff.
Okay, let's see. So about the property and land access to Cape St. Mary and Lopez. Yeah, there hasn't been any discussion on it. There's a lot of private property there in between. I imagine that would be a pretty big undertaking to establish public access to that. It's funny because before I was like, oh, I need to look in the RMP for some of the questions y'all were asking. And then I realized I actually had a printed version on my desk sitting in front of me. I think, part of the management at Cape St. Mary, let's see. So, there's something there about providing a remote experience for folks that I was established in the RMP. And so keeping a water landing there would probably be in the best interest to support that only. And I just can't see us, not to say that it could never happen or that we couldn't look at it more, but just off the top of my head, gosh, that would be hard to create land-based public access there. Yeah, and so I don't think we're ever going to use pesticides here, probably, but we might. I don't know. Herbicides, yeah, that's if we want to do some landscape scale restoration and management activities that will effectively get rid of weeds and stuff, we're going to have to use all the tools at our disposal. And there's safe choices that have been established locally that we could probably use. That's not written in stone. We'd still have to go through a public process and do the environmental analysis for that. But we're going to keep it in our toolbox. To be frank, we're not going to just dismiss the the potential use of herbicides because they might be the only way to accomplish a management goal that we want to. I can't.
You're not using any currently, though.
No, we're not doing any landscape scale vegetation management. We might we might cut a weed here or there, or do some thinning along those some cutting back of vegetation to keep the the trails of Watmount open, and that's about it. I know there's strong feelings about the use of herbicides, and this is definitely something that we need to look into more and do some public outreach on. And the Park Service has similar projects that they're thinking of undertaking. And so one idea that we had was maybe to do a symposium, on herbicide use, so that we could do some education and learn more about these issues as a community, and we could dig into this stuff a little bit more. And thanks for the referral for that, those presentations. I'll take a look at those. But definitely when we do anything that is going to impact the land that other management authorities manage, we're going to partner with them. we're pretty aware that we need to manage things here at a landscape level, that the things that we do on BLM land affects its neighbors and the neighboring environment as well, and vice versa. So that's one of the reasons the terrestrial managers group is so important. Not sure who was first with the hand up here, but let's go Tom, then Tracy.
Yeah, I've unfortunately got a couple of them here, so I'll just go through them and you can deal with whatever you want to deal with here. Just FYI on the Cape St. Mary parcel, I don't know if you're aware that there is a county road right-of-way that goes right to the Cape St. Mary BLM boundary.
Right.
So there is that route to potentially get upland access to Cape St. Mary. I don't need a comment on that one.
That's right. No, yeah,
then,
no, thanks for reminding me. I was thinking of another piece of property altogether. I apologize.
Yeah. And then two questions, and I'll use Iceberg Point as an example, but I think they apply to other areas as well. One about ACEC designations from the past, and the other is about, helping me understand the steps necessary going forward before certain management actions can be taken. So on the ACEC front, my understanding is with the RMP being finalized, we no longer have the ACECs designated at Colville and Iceberg. And if that's the case, and rules haven't been made to put closures in on things like camping at Iceberg, does that mean if I wanted to, and I don't, tonight I could go pitch a tent at Iceberg because the ACEC rule prohibiting camping is gone and no new rule has been put in its place?
Well,
question one on Iceberg.
Yeah. There was actually never a supplemental rule created for those ACECs, so you could have done that at any point. It was something that we enforced through voluntary compliance, whether that was understood within or without the BLM or not. I haven't been able to find any supplemental rules that were based on those ACECs.
But we were able to, apparently, whether we were able to or not, we did put up signage. So there is BLM signage saying no camping at Iceberg.
Yes. Yeah, and I think that will continue to be the management going forward. While we put those other tools that we have for enforcement in place, we're going to ask people not to camp there.
Yeah, that just increases my sense of urgency around putting those supplemental rules in place. My next question on Iceberg is more just understanding process. So, and it would apply to Colville or a bunch of other places. The RMP talks about meadow restoration. And as just one example of many activities that BLM should engage in, including trail maintenance, et cetera, I don't understand what steps need to be taken between now and potential meadow restoration activities at Iceberg. It seems like we maybe need the RMA plan in place before we do that. We definitely have to do some consultation. We have a NEPA process, however large, for the actual activities being proposed, but help me understand the steps, and maybe a sense of timeline as I watch the meadows at Iceberg go away every year. How long before the proposed restoration from the RMP might actually turn into activity on the ground?
Good question. Right, so there's different ways that there's actually. Oh, Kurt, go ahead.
I've got some, Brie, but I've been talking to Lonnie about it, so I kind of have an insight on what his thought process is.
Yeah, go for it, as that's what I was going to bring up.
Yep. So Tom, essentially, if you're talking meadow restoration, we got to separate kind of the two, right? So there's trails, which is a different piece, and then there's meadow restoration. So let's keep those two in different boxes, okay? So with meadow restoration, that's considered under a fuels component or ecology component. So essentially, what we will have to do is we'll have to come up with a proposal of how we plan to try to do that, right? No, and we're gonna have several different alternatives, right? So Tom, there could be some that is just some brush clearing, that sort of thing. And then there could be some brush clearing with some burning of those piles, that sort of thing, to try to get some of that back. And then there could just be some restoration work as far as planting, seeding, that sort of thing. So we'll come up with those ideas and then we'll present it. And again, that's a big public process. And then once we agree on, here are some of the potential ways in which we could do that, that's when we need to bring in all the other specialists from our group. So we're going to have a cultural survey at that time and other such surveys to make sure we're not having any impacts to some of those other entities, right? So that process, Tom, that's a 6 to 8 month probably. And when I was just talking to my fire management officer and my fuels managing officer, and essentially what they want to do is try to get out there this summer, try to take a look at it and say, okay, here are some possible ways. Now, and Tom, just realize this is just what we come up with, right? Then we're going to have public meetings at some point to say, hey, this is what we came up as the BLM. Here are some potential alternatives of how we could start this meadow restoration that fit within the framework of the RMP. And at that point, after we have some of those public meetings and we do some of that background work, that's the point where we'll really initiate into the NEPA process and start to go all the way through it. So start to finish, Tom. I mean, if we started this summer, I would say we'd probably be done with the NEPA and be able to sign it by spring and then start implementation. Now, implementation could be many, many years. It could be 5 years before we finally get to a place where we'd like to be. And to be honest, there could be places where we say, let's try this. If this starts to work, then we'll keep going that route. If not, then we're going to go back and we're going to do more seeding. So hopefully that kind of gets to that part. Does that work?
Yeah, I think that answers most of the questions. I would encourage you to start your public process as early as possible.
Oh,
And so if there are people who are experts coming out to look at the landscape this summer, for example, having them available for just a public Q&A might be interesting. Just things to help make it seem like this isn't a sudden action on BLM's part will help reduce public pushback.
And one of the other things, Tom, that's been interesting is he's been out at least twice already, not meeting with the public, but meeting with some of the local ecologists and meeting with some of the folks that have done restoration, meadow restoration, other landscape restoration on some of the islands. And what are some of the things they've learned and what are some of the mistakes they've made so we don't make the same sort of mistakes. So he's trying to get up to speed on some of that because it's very different from some of the stuff that we have worked with in the past. So he's trying to get up to speed. And then, of course, we'll start to have him meet with some of I'd love to have him meet with the MAC and start answering some of those questions. So,
yeah, and as Genevieve points out in the chat, I hope if he hasn't already, there's strong conversations with the tribes throughout.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And we've already started some of those discussions just to the side in our government to government stuff.
Yeah, Tom, it's a great point. And it's something that will slow the process down a little bit too, to be quite frank, because we have a lot of different tribal interests to work with. And, you know, understanding the cultural component of Iceberg is particularly complicated because we have a goal there of potentially reintroducing, you know, some of the traditional management practices and, you know, cultivations of local foods that were done there. And so there's this huge cultural component to projects like this that kind of triple the complexity of them. And so I think actually the work we do with the tribes will be a major part of what establishes, you know, our timelines here, as well as the availability of our, you know, fire resources to be able to do the work and the contracting and everything, which, as Chris said, Lonnie's pretty excited about. And so he's really driving some of these conversations forward.
Yeah, I would encourage wherever possible to use this as an opportunity to bring the tribe and the rest of the local community together rather than give the local community any opportunity to think the tribes are working on their own agenda, behind our back, whatever, and vice versa, that the local community doesn't get to a point where the tribes feel like they're being undermined. I think there are ways to do this to bring both sides along together and make it seem like a joint action rather than one side winning.
Yeah, that'll be particularly challenging, I think, because a lot of the information and of course our conversations and negotiations with the sovereign nations are proprietary. And so having those conversations with them about how they want to engage with the community will be important. But it's definitely going to be a challenge.
Tracy.
All right, this kind of goes back to the topic that Steve Snowden brought up on Cape St. Mary's. And it kind of is a broader topic of how does BLM, how does Brie and all of us manage the BLM lands that don't have any public access from the land side. And Lopez Pass is an example, the point at Sperry Peninsula, Cape St. Mary's has been mentioned, President's Channel piece. And while all of those could be accessible by water, those three in particular don't have real good landing sites. The only one, Lopez Pass, has a tiny landing spot, but then you get into the Sperry Peninsula trespassing boundaries. But the Cape St. Mary and President's Channel, even with very, very experienced kayakers, it's really more like belaying your kayak up the rocks to be able to land there. So before any decisions could be made, or even the what BLM information gives out, being able to look at those lands, how can they be accessed? Should they be accessed? Before, Brie, you say there could be just water access only. And with that, I know if the land bank often will partner if a land neighboring, let's say Cape St. Mary's, came up for sale. That may be where the land bank gets involved and determines, is that going to be the right fit for them to create that public access? Already President's Channel is really no public access. Again, you'd have to lasso a rock and pull your kayak up to access it. But the neighboring property is land bank, and they were donated that land, and they said, yes, it's great salmon habitat. But again, there's really no trail in the RMP plan, or when you look at those sites, it's not necessarily planned to be a public access place, unless a neighboring land connected to Turtleback as an example. So I think that comes into the broader conversation. How do MAC members get familiar with these lands so we can make recommendations? And whether we're going to put it into this working group discussion, we do want to reach out to MAC members to find out what sites have you not been to? What sites would you like to make a planned field trip to? And we should put Cape St. Mary's on that list. So that's what it's more just to answer Steve's opinion on access to Cape St. Mary's.
And yeah, sorry, Steve, I was thinking of that Sperry Point when that was the one that popped into my visual brain when you'd mentioned Cape St. Mary. So yeah, sorry about that confusion. Man, if anybody wants to belay their kayak out there with me, that sounds like a fun day.
Probably only if it's raining and freezing cold, though.
Of course.
I like those things.
And apparently I've not been to Cape St. Mary, but a neighbor who grew up out there, who's also an expert kayaker, really says that land is so beautiful in the wildflower season. It's a good thing that people can't access it easily.
Mm-hmm.
Steve, have you been out there, Steve Snowden?
Yes,
I have been out there several times. It's absolutely delightful in the view. I mean, you see all the way from the mountains up in Canada, Baker and the Olympics. It's absolutely spectacular. But a little bit more from what Tom was saying, there is the disused county right of way. And we were told by the Public Works that if we, and we by this is the Lopez Community Trails Network, paid for a survey, we could put a trail on there. But unfortunately, there are two lobes of BLM land, and the right of way only reaches the first one. The main one, the larger one, there would still be about 30 feet or so of private land in between.
This is all coming back to me now. Marcia actually brought me out there and we walked that right away.
Yeah, did you have a good day for it? How did you like the view?
I mean, this was like my first like 5 days out here, and I think I just walked around with my jaw dropped the whole time, taking pictures with my phone to share with my parents. Let's see. Yeah, you know, I think this is just something we're gonna have to probably just have a separate session to really think about. I need to go back out there and look at it again.
There's another thing you might want to consider when you're out there looking at it again. You know, the northern 40 acres of the BLM land at Chadwick Hill, there is also a disused county right-of-way that connects that 40-acre parcel to the Cape St. Mary Road. Something I've mentioned in the past, that it brings up the lovely idea of being able to walk from Chadwick Hill to Cape St. Mary if all the ducks were in a row.
That would be a pretty cool resource. Yeah, I mean, and the thing is, you know, I mean, I am all for exploring the feasibility of things like this, you know, where we can, where we can do things that are in line with the Monuments Proclamation and the direction in the RMP. We really have a lot of latitude to create some wonderful opportunities, as well as do some amazing things with restoration and conservation here.
So since we are kind of in that group discussion here, what I wanted to bring up is both Tracy and I and Brie have been in discussions with the San Juan Islands National Historical Park. They have a new visitor center that it's had a lot of tribal input into the way they designed it, and I haven't seen it yet, but we have an invite to go out there and have the national parks and their people explain how it all came about as a little field trip. And Bree suggested that our September meeting, that we do it in person, and we would probably have some sort of, would pick a place that we would have some sort of hybrid option, but to do it in person on San Juan Island and then make that as a field trip after the meeting. And which also sparked our conversation as to, particularly for some of the newer members, are there places in the monument that you would like to see, or, you know, even if it's a casual field trip, doesn't have to be the whole group. And so I'm opening it up for discussion, if that sounds like a good idea for the September meeting, and also anything else, places that you would say, gee, I've never been there, or I'd like to, put 2 or 3 places together perhaps. And so if you could raise your hand or unmute yourself. Tracy, I just noticed you unmuted yourself.
Yeah, I was going to say also just write a list into the chat, and as this is kind of ongoing, I could also say if Brie, if you were just going to make a site visit quickly and felt a few of us should go along and just take photos and report about it, that would also really accomplish similar goals. If
You mean the visitor center?
no, and separate from the visitor center.
Oh, okay.
Let's say you wanted to get out to Cape St. Mary and it was one of your coffee clutches, you would just say, I would love to maybe limit it to 4 or 5 people. Let's go out to Cape St. Mary. So that in us coming up with a list of places we haven't visited or would like to visit, it could go both ways, including when you're already planning to go out there.
Jamie,
Kurt.
I got a quick question I got to ask here. How is this BLM related? Because the MAC is a BLM chartered group and we have to maintain BLM themes or ideas or something that's related to BLM lands. And I'm just curious how this is related.
Well, it's supposed to be really interesting, and they are partnering, one of our partner organizations. And the other thing where it ties in is because of the tribal influence in the design and what is contained within the visitors would help maybe guide us as we move forward with our tribal relations on how we implement this plan.
So we're going to go visit a Park Service site to figure out better relationships with our tribal partners.
Well, we could see what was important to them and understand why it was included or not included.
Okay, I'll have to think about that.
Tom, and then Ruth.
So I have been to the visitor center, though I'm told it's been refreshed even more since I've visited. I think it's a fantastic idea because I think that not only will we learn as a group about the tribe's presence in the San Juans from the visit, we'll learn about different approaches to interpretation, different approaches to signage. There are a lot of things that we can learn about. We're not out there studying the Park Service. We're learning about one way of accomplishing a bunch of the goals that we have in the RMP around signage, interpretation, tribal coordination, etc. So I think the field trip sounds great. I love the idea of doing it in conjunction with a MAC meeting. And I would encourage us to also visit Cattle Point while we're on the island, if we're going to pull that off, because that is probably our most visited piece of the monument. And it's, what, 1.5 miles from the visitor center, 2 miles from the visitor center. I would also offer in terms of people who want to go visit places they haven't visited or haven't visited in depth, for those on the MAC who are not Lopesians or even the Lopesians, if anyone wants to spend some time on the larger properties on the south end of Lopez, like Colville, Chadwick, Watmow, Iceberg, I'm happy to do personal tours. So just reach out to me and I'll be more than happy to take a hike with you guys and talk about those places.
Thanks, Tom. Ruth.
So to answer Kurt's question, I would also reiterate the connection with Cattle Point. And there is a connection with Island Marble Butterfly Restoration, which is relevant to BLM, and it's something the park is very engaged in, as is DNR down there. And more to the point, I think the opportunity for MAC participants to chat with Park Service staff who have a lot of insights into working with the local communities to achieve their goals I think that would be an addition, as well as seeing the visitor center and discussing how they went about that. In terms of the question of where would people like to go, I think this meadow restoration idea would be a great place to start exploring, going out and looking at the current condition of the meadows on Lopez and thinking about next steps towards restoration, since that's going to be a very long-term and complex question and project.
Great, thanks for the suggestion, Ruth.
Okay, so yeah, so potential fit. So there's a lot of things that the Park Service is doing right now that have some bearing on things that we're planning on doing, right? They are involved in some restoration activities that then some vegetation management. They're actually doing they're developing, and they will be deep in the weeds of that, no pun intended, this fall with developing their vegetation management plans. And that's something that we'll probably steal from, because we have similar resources and we want to be doing things similar ways that our neighbors are doing, right? Like if they're doing some kind of treatment that's going to get rid of a noxious weed in areas that are adjacent to ours, and we don't do it at the same time, and we just end up recontaminating them with that noxious weed, that's not good for any of us, right? Again, one of the reasons we have the terrestrial managers group. We also have we've been talking about these issues with DNR and Cattle Point too, is like how we're going to collectively manage vegetation management, in places like that. They are doing, of course, island marble butterfly stuff that they could educate us about, and there's some other things. I don't know about the feasibility of doing a field trip. I have to look into this and figure out like what we're allowed to do, what the particular liability concerns would be, what the FACA rules are, and everything else. And so I need to figure out how to make this happen. But at the very least, what I would say is I highly recommend that you all go to the visitor center. You're right in that they just did a major renovation of it, and it looks, the new exhibits look amazing. They have sunk a ton of resources into their living language exhibit and made that so much better. I'm happy to go over there with you or my family if you're on the island doing that kind of stuff. I'd love to join. And then I think what we could do, what I would suggest we do, and for accessibility and time and everything else, is we could invite Joe Dolan, who was integral in creating the collaboration that led to the good outcomes that we saw there, to come and speak at our meeting. And give a presentation and have some question time for us to be able to ask, for you all to be able to ask some questions of him. I think that we could definitely do. I will look into the potential for a field trip for to the MPS and to any of other of our partners. I think those are things that I have to coordinate with my leadership and take the lead on. So if you're interested in doing stuff like that, let me know, and I will research it and report back on what we can do, what we're allowed to do, and what we can accomplish. And yeah, as far as visiting BLM resource areas, there's all kinds of things that we're going to be doing this summer, and I will keep you all informed of when we're going out to places, and you're all welcome to join. We'll make sure that we have a volunteer agreement in place and some job hazard analyses, and we can go do some volunteer activities and visit these places when we're going out and doing things. I'm hoping that there'll be a lot of cool things going on this summer, and once I get a little bit better idea of what the schedule will be, I'll be sharing that out to all of you. Like I said, we have a bunch of site visits that are going to be really cool, where we're bringing in some of our subject matter experts from the mainland to do things. And I think that would be a great, those would be great opportunities to kind of engage with what we're doing.
Thank you, Brie. That
Yeah.
sounds good. And there was a thing in the chat, and Genevieve, I know you were having trouble with your audio before, but did you want to talk about a meadow restoration now, or should I put that down as a topic that you would like to present to your thoughts to the group, like perhaps at the next meeting? And if you can't, you can always type it in the chat. Okay, I'll type it in the chat. I know she was having some connection problems because she was out doing some monitoring in the field today. So we're still kind of ahead of things, but is there anything else you had, Brie, or anybody else on the MAC that they wanted to bring up today before I move into the open forum?
I'm still working on the logistics for the Delbert Anderson Jazz Trio's visit. I had a really productive conversation with the Lopez Community Center last week, and they're holding a spot for me. I ought to figure out what's going to be the most feasible option, but that's looking very promising. And right now, I have it tentatively reserved for 2 days. Thinking about trying to make a whole celebration festival out of the event, but I haven't confirmed or done the work to make sure that everything is going to be feasible and work out with that. So I'm working on it, and I will keep you all posted as that develops. There's actually a lot of moving parts to Delbert's visit here, including the cultural component, the public engagement, the concert, the support from the community that's going to be needed to house the band and create a good experience for them out here, and hopefully they'll want to come back. So let's see, and let's see, is there anything else going on right now that I need to share out with all of you? I'm sure there's stuff that I'm forgetting. There's just a ton of things going on. That's all the notes that I had. Just taking a quick peek at my calendar here to see if there's anything coming up on that. I think that's all I have for you now. Oh, yes, I think there was one more thing. We wanted to talk about creating like maybe a management report that would go out prior to the MAC meetings, so that you could basically review a lot of what we spend time talking about in the MAC, and it would hopefully allow you all to prepare for these meetings a little bit better, and then create some more time for discussion in place of just simple report out. And I think that's a great idea. It's something that I will try to initiate by our September meeting, and if not that one, then at least in the December meeting, I'll have hopefully a good format in place for both sending a kind of a pre-briefing package to all of you, as well as the tribal forum, to prep us a little bit better for these meetings.
Great.
I think that's everything I had. Yeah, thanks.
Tracy.
So this kind of touches upon one piece in our working group discussion, but also from Kurt's hesitation that we take a MAC field trip. And the last meeting, we got into what our guidelines are for having a subcommittee, but there's different ways. We know the MAC can get together to learn about new things. And it could be that we have a brief discussion now while Kurt's still on this forum, but also in September meeting, Tom Reeve has looked into what we can actually do without BLM's approval as BLM members to learn something new. I don't know if Tom, you'd be ready to talk a little bit about what you learned, but I think there's a lot of confusion about what is how do we become better MAC members by learning about new subjects without having to go through all the approval process to get a site visit approved? Tom, do you have anything to add, or shall we put that to September?
I mean, I can point people at various web pages that try to explain FACA and all of that stuff, but the Federal Advisory Committee Act. But my understanding, I'm not an attorney, don't quote me, on legal issues, is that as a MAC, we need to have a formal meeting with public presence or public accessibility and input if we ever want to take formal action. And that requires a quorum, and there are 2 levels of quorum, blah, 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 blah. But then we can take formal action and make recommendations to BLM. As individual MAC members, we can do whatever we want as private citizens. There's nothing that prohibits groups of us from getting together out in the real world and having conversations. We obviously can't take formal action as we're just sitting on the beach together as a group of 8 or 9 or 10 people. And we can obviously visit BLM sites that are open to the public. We can also visit National Park Service map sites that are open to the public. In the case of actually asking the Park Service to make a presentation to us,
Absolutely.
that's, you know, that's questionable. I don't know. I mean, they can make, we could as individuals ask for that presentation. They might say no. If we as a formal MAC want that presentation, then it probably has to be organized by BLM. The BLM designated federal officer, in this case Kurt, though he can delegate, has the authority to call MAC meetings, to create subcommittees or to approve subcommittees. But the term subcommittee is a specific thing within the Federal Advisory Committee Act, which is a BLM approved group of us. And we can have, I believe, non-MAC members on subcommittees to advise the MAC.
Yes.
That doesn't mean that 3 or 4 of us can't go off and come up with something and advise the MAC. You just don't call it a subcommittee because that's a different thing. The MAC members can meet with BLM to prep for meetings. They can meet with BLM to learn information. They can report that information back to the full MAC. But if they are making, in essence, decisions on behalf of the MAC that will not be heavily discussed before the MAC makes a decision, that starts smelling like a subcommittee, or actually that starts smelling like the MAC working behind the scenes. So if a group of us comes together with an idea, that idea has to have room to be fully discussed by the MAC before the MAC takes action on it. There's a whole lot of language I just spewed out there, but I don't know if that helps clarify things.
Yep, that's really good. Just 2 points of clarity on that. And you said that very well, Tom. Excellent work. A couple things. Formal committee. If you guys want to meet, let's say you meet on the beach, that's great. No problem with that. But if you say, hey, MAC is going to meet up, see, now you're making it formal. And there's a point which we transition over, right? You can say that we're meeting as a group. It just can't be a MAC group, if you see what I'm getting at. So that's because it sounds like, hey, the MAC's having a separate meeting, that sort of thing. And that's the caution there, okay? Because somebody could come in and say, well, they're meeting as a group and they're making decisions behind our backs, that sort of thing, as the public. Okay, so it's just a word of caution. You could certainly do that, and I would encourage you to do that. And then the second piece was, if I did designate a specific committee, a subcommittee, typically that subcommittee has a specific function. So it wouldn't be like, okay, let's explore restoration. Now, see, it wouldn't be restoration, but if it was restoration of meadows at Iceberg, well, now that is a specific subcommittee, and I could do that sort of thing. Or if it was like parking at Watmile, that would be a specific subcommittee that we could appoint. that sort of thing. So it just couldn't be parking, it just couldn't be travel management, it'd have to be to a specific location, a specific idea, but the rest of that was spot on.
Yeah, and at this point, I haven't heard anything in past MAC discussions that implies that a subcommittee makes sense. The entire MAC seems engaged on most of our topics.
Yeah.
There are very few topics that I can come up with where a subcommittee would make sense, and we can cross that bridge if we come to it. At this point, I think the MAC, to the extent we need to learn about stuff, we should invite each other along, saying, hey, I'm going over to American Camp, anyone else want to join? And
Yep.
that's fine.
Yep.
But there are very few, there isn't, like I know Jamie faced in the county council, a law requiring, if more than X number of people get together in the same room at the same time, they have to like avoid each other like the plague. We don't have any of those rules around the MAC. We are volunteers serving BLM, and our official roles are all about the decisions being made and recommendations being voted on by the MAC. Outside those official roles, we are members of the community, and we should do what we can to get educated about these places.
Absolutely.
And I think between the two of you brought up a really good point. I'm bringing this up as a topic, but it doesn't have to be official. We can adjourn the meeting on the 27th and say,
Absolutely.
anybody who wants to come, we're going down.
Absolutely.
I'm going down to Iceberg Point, and I've got a van. Do you want to come?
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. Well said, Jamie. Thank you.
Because of all those things, Tom, I have learned the right wording around it.
Nice. Yeah, let me look into that a little, Jamie. I'm sure we can figure out some ways to create some valuable learning opportunities that will engage the MAC.
I just, before we go into the open forum, I just kind of want to hit some high points. We talked about this in our next meeting. I've got some topics written down for the next several months. It sounds to me like, Brie, your number one priority is getting your capacity up so that you can get something done that we keep asking you about, and get those people in place. And with that, I will move into, and possibly by our next meeting, we might have we might have our appointments, and to keep the committee full when we're, we'll have a quorum either way, as Kurt said earlier, but we might also have those positions filled. And with that, I'd like to, let's see, Sam looks like he dropped off the call. Are there any other of our visitors that are tribal representatives or tribal members? We'll combine the two. And I don't see any elected officials or their representatives on the call. So I will go to the general public if you have any comments. Just raise your hand or unmute yourself. Alexandra.
Hi there, you can hear me?
Yes.
I just have a comment about this question of vegetation management and herbicide use. It's my observation that since the onset of widespread acceptance of climate change, and with the simultaneous COVID infection, that there's become almost a religious fervor around the concept of following science. And the reason I'm saying this is because it seems like when that topic came up, there was this real defensiveness around the topic in particular of the use of herbicides. And I've kind of followed this because my professional specialty over the last 25 years has been in the area of toxicity and its effects on human health, which in the early days of that profession led me to doing a huge amount of research into what we know and we don't know about the effects of toxic substances. That led me, once I moved up here, to really question this whole idea of noxious weeds, which is a thing in Washington state and a big deal in San Juan County, that we've got to eradicate these noxious weeds at all costs. And looking at the information that I was able to glean just from conversations with various people in this state, it seems that the so-called science on which the determinations have been made about what herbicides are safe, that the science underlying them is very, very shaky at best, that we really don't have adequate quote unquote science to really justify the widespread use of things that have been deemed safe. That some of the references at the government level, even the national government level, are to so-called research that was provided by the manufacturers back in the 70s of Roundup and its friends. So I feel like I just want to raise that point, that when people have a tendency to get really defensive about how we have to accomplish this goal that we have set for ourselves, to really wonder whether that goal is really necessary, if the only way we can accomplish it is by the use of substances and even machinery, which is another issue I have, where people are not really looking at the whole picture when we consider things like, well, you know, we have to have electric cars, but let's pretend like they don't have any impact. Let's not look at the whole cradle to grave story of what's required with mining and what's required with manufacturing and what's required with even when we're doing mechanical removal of vegetation. We've got to have a bulldozer, or we've got to have chainsaws, or we've got to have this or that, and really not fully evaluating what is the full cost benefit analysis of all of the different things that we're just assuming, well, because we've done it this way. And I really think it's time for us to take a broader look and a second look at some of, you know, if there's no way to accomplish a goal without poisoning some other part of the ecosystem, do we really need that goal? And I don't know the real answer to that. I'm not saying that we shouldn't be doing the vegetation management, or we shouldn't be, using this or that. I just really want us to question the underlying assumptions about the so-called science on which those assumptions are based. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.
And if I could, Jamie, just real quick respond. I mean, just to make sure that folks are clear, it is part of the plan, that there is the potential, but it is not our first or second or even third option right now. I mean, we don't have anybody trained in it. We don't have any herbicides. There's no plans to use any herbicides, just to make sure that folks understand that. So it's just part of the toolbox, but it's not anything that we're really considering at this point.
Well, thanks. I was just replying to something that Brie said earlier about, well, we are going to do this and we are going to have to use herbicides. And so that was where that,
okay.
and that we're going to have a lot of public comment and all this. And I just know there's a tendency to want to educate the public with the assumption that the public is ignorant. And if they only just knew that we had this science that proved that this or that thing is safe, then they should, go along with this plan. But what I'm trying to point out is the underlying science is not there.
Understood.
Yeah. Thank you.
Wendy Mickle.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. My name is Wendy Mickle. I'm a longtime volunteer monitor on Lopez. Thank you very much for the changes in the final RMP. These are very important items, and I'm really glad to see that they were done. I would also like to emphasize the importance of getting more staff for the monument, both for the work that needs to be done and for helping Brie, who is having to cover so much. So please do everything possible to move this along. I know we'll all be the better for it when we have more people. And that's all I have to say, except to thank the MAC for their work for the monument. I really appreciate your work and all you do. That's all. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Wendy.
Thank you.
James McCubbin.
Hi, this is James McCubbin. I'm with Friends of the San Juans. I mostly want to say thank you to the members of the MAC and all the BLM personnel for all the great work that you're doing and moving ahead with implementing the RMP. I do want to mirror a little bit of Alexandra's comments and concerns about the use of herbicides. Brie did mention that would be subject to a public process and an environmental review, and I'll take that at face level. I think there are some concerns there. Obviously, without knowing, what the plan would be or what herbicides, I can't say that there's an overwhelming concern or that Friends would necessarily oppose that. But we would certainly want to have an opportunity to review that along with the rest of the public. So thank you for that. And then also just on this concept of doing field trips and so forth, I do want to just express a little bit of a word of caution there. I think you do have probably lower requirements because this is an advisory committee. But I can tell you, if you get together with a quorum, particularly, basically for the reason of visiting BLM sites or monument sites and for discussing MAC business, even if you're doing it, informally, that's, maybe think about whether that passes a smell test if somebody was trying to, get on your case for some reason, which I'm not saying I would, but I think that, think about best practices, try and talk to, BLM legal counsel about that if you can. But one thing, I think, Jamie, you mentioned this, is if you do a field trip after your meeting and, during the meeting, say, okay, now we're going to break the meeting, but now we're headed down to the beach, and that's done in the full public eye and the public's invited to come and attend and walk with you. I think that's, probably the way to go and won't impair your ability to do that. You can actually do a public meeting, on the beach. You have to have some issues about, keeping notes and whatever, but there's ways to do that. So, I certainly appreciate your good intentions. I think it is really important for all of you to get out and see sites and talk about these really important issues, which you're on it, and that's great. So, thank you.
Thank you, James.
Thanks,
Those are some
James.
great points, James. And one thing I want to add to that is, if we do a site visit, ADA compliant, that sort of thing, there's a lot of other considerations that we'll have to talk to some of our legal counsel about. But you bring up some great points. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, and ADA is another complication. I've dealt with those issues in a different context under different laws, and sometimes you can get around that just because it's not possible to comply in order to accomplish that. But yeah, definitely talk to your legal counsel, and again, thank you for considering those things.
Yeah, and if it's disclosed, that's another piece. Thank you. Yep.
One last thing, Wendy, you still have I don't know if you still have your hand up or if you put it up again. Nope, that was it. Okay. Is there anything else before we adjourn? I see a note in the chat thanking Dell Gunther again for his service, and I would like to also extend that feeling from the MAC that it's very nice of you to have served on the MAC, and we hate to see you go, Dell. Okay, seeing no other hands up or anything, I'm going to adjourn the meeting at precisely at noon.
Yep. And I do want this Tracy, Kurt to stay on, or whoever's, I need to be able to get all the recording stuff done and approval I'll give you a thumbs up when you can shut it down.
Oh, okay. Wendy, you have your hand up again?
Yes, I'm noting that your public presentation time was from 12 to 1. If anybody was joining you at noon to speak to you, they will find you gone. So perhaps you'd like to hang around for another 5 minutes in case someone is coming.
We should.
We should. We can do that. Thank you.
And I would like to ask Genevieve, is this your last meeting with us? We weren't quite sure earlier if she's listening, but hopefully she can hear us with listening to the text. And if this is your last MAC meeting, Genevieve, thank you so much for all your years. And hopefully we can invite you back for a presentation on meadow restoration in September, or if latest in December.
I know she's in and out on her monitoring project. She put something in the chat.
I do want to mention that I know Tom has put a couple things about FACA resources in the chat, and I did as well. There is actually GSA training that is targeted for folks like me who work with advisory committees and folks like you who are serving on advisory committees. You can sign up for online training through those websites, and I would highly encourage that.
I'm just kind of looking around my screen to see if anybody joins us for public comment.
Jamie, have you guys had all this warm weather?
We had a couple days. I think that's all we're allowed right now.
I think we set records 2 days and maybe not in a row, but 2 days out of the last 3 or 4 in Spokane for the high temperatures.
Wow.
85 and 86 or 87. It's ridiculous how warm it was.
I think over here or up here, April was like the coldest on record, or maybe not the coldest on record, but overall it was one of the coldest months.
Yep. Same here. We went from winter to summer. No in between.
Well, I am very excited. I just planted some fruit trees in front of my house and got the deer fencing up around them. But I was kind of afraid with the sudden turn of weather because I had those bare root trees, and so I was afraid that they wouldn't do well. But so far they seem to be happy.
Well, figure everything will dry out soon enough.
Yeah, next is the flood stage because we're hitting the warm temperatures. All the snow's coming off the mountains, so it'll be interesting to see if we hit any flood stages around here. And then we have rain and thunderstorms on top of it. We just had an area about 2.5 miles blow out down in our Cottonwood field office in Idaho, so the entire road washed out.
What's the prognosis for the fire season?
What I always hear, Jamie, and it's the truth, is we'll tell you in October, but the truth be told, there are some areas of the country that might be the southern states are ones that are really going to be at a higher risk. We get into that season where we'll possibly be at just a normal fire season in August and September. So it's been a fairly wet year, and it sounds like it'll be a fairly average type of fire season, maybe not above average like we've seen in a little bit in the last few years.
Oh,
that'd be nice.
Yeah, that'd be good.
The National Interagency Fire Center just issued their predictive service. Their predictive services just issued a report on May 1st that I happened to see. I'm going to put that in the chat here right now if you're interested in taking a look at that.
Okay, well, we waited an extra few minutes, so I will now adjourn the meeting. And seeing I didn't see anyone new join, and no other hands went up. So with that, we'll adjourn the meeting at 12:05 for our May 4th meeting. Thank you all.
Thanks, everyone.